Okay, so this is the third session of the Stoic Jew Shiur, and I got a call from someone who is a college student who's writing his senior thesis on Stoicism and Judaism or something in that realm. And so I had a disclaimer. He wanted to like ask me questions about it. He might be on tonight. I'm not sure. He wanted to ask me questions about it, and I gave him a disclaimer, and I realized I haven't stated this disclaimer in a long time. I might not never have stated it. Okay, I am not I do not consider myself knowledgeable about Stoicism, and I'm certainly not a scholar or an expert on Stoicism. I actually would say I'm a user of Stoicism selectively. Okay, in other words, I mean, I've been reading Stoic stuff since high school, but my orientation towards Stoicism is really like reading stuff and then taking what I can get from it that I find useful and then incorporating it into my worldview. Okay. And so like, nothing that I say here should be taken as like an authoritative reflection of what the Stoics actually held. And ironically, I don't know if this is ironically, but apparently there's some question of whether Marcus Aurelius was just doing the same thing. I actually forgot to highlight this, but in the introduction to the edition of Marcus Aurelius, oh yeah, here we go. It says here, hold on. Oh, maybe this is saying the opposite. Hold on. Maybe I'm thinking of two different things. Yeah, it says that. Okay, I can't find it right now. Oh, yeah. Here we go. It says, in Marcus's time, there was no Stoic school as such, no particular teacher recognized as the head of the school, and no particular city where one went to study this brand of philosophy. So his education in Stoicism was somewhat haphazard. His commitment to Stoic principles is clear, but he was an amateur philosopher. He was introduced to it in his youth by Rusticus and others, but when his formal education was over, although he was able to attend occasional lectures, he had to rely largely on reading and regularly checking that he was on what he considered the true path. So I find that a little funny because he eventually became considered to be one of the major Stoic writers, but like he was just going by whatever Stoicism he read and applying it to his life as much as he could. Yeah, Steve?
So there was a recognized Stoic movement at the time. It's not just something like post facto we categorize as
Yeah.
Stoicism.
Yeah, so it's called the Stoic movement based on the Stoa, which was a particular what's the word? Not platform, patio, a painted patio where they held their lectures. And it was started. I mean, I actually meant to brush up on my Stoic history, but I just want to see if I can find a start date. Hold on. It started long before him, and it started in Greece. I don't have that right now, but yeah, there was a long-standing Stoic school, and there were a lot of different Stoic philosophers and teachers. Most of the writings we don't have now, and they had different approaches to it, and he was really towards the end. Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer here. Okay. Especially because we're going to be talking, well, depending on how far we get, we're going to be talking about maybe the soul today. Okay. And this is falls into this category as well. Okay. So let's attempt to do what we did last time and failed, but it was a good failure. We're going to quickly read the chapter again, and then we're just going to focus on the end, trying to analyze it, and we'll see if we can conclude our analysis. Not that any analysis concludes. Okay. So. Also, okay, well, I'll read this, and I got to say something I forgot the last two times also. So at the start of the day, tell yourself, I shall meet people who are officious, ungrateful, abusive, treacherous, malicious, and selfish. In every case, they've got like this because of their ignorance of good and bad. But I have seen goodness and badness for what they are, and I know that what is good is what is morally right, and what is bad is what is morally wrong. And I've seen the true nature of the wrongdoer himself and know that he's related to me, not in the sense that we share blood and seed, but by virtue of the fact that we both partake of the same intelligence, and so a portion of the divine. None of them can harm me anyway, because none of them can infect me with immorality, nor can I become angry with someone who's related to me or hate him, because we are born to work together like feet or hands or eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To work against each other is therefore unnatural, and anger and rejection count as working against. Okay, so before I forget, I meant to propose an experiment last time, in case anyone wants to conduct it. And I think I mentioned that I've done this before, but if anyone wants to try actually beginning the morning by reading this out loud, it helps, print it out, and I could send it to you if you want. Print it out and then put it someplace where you're going to see it. It actually does work in many ways. I mean, you're not going to remember it automatically, but it's a worthwhile experiment to try. So if anyone wants to try that and then report back, then I'd be very curious to hear what your results are. I am going to make an effort to do this starting, I guess, tomorrow, because I only remember this today. So we'll see. So if anyone wants to join me, then feel free. Okay. So what we talked about last time really the most was the no man can harm me. Right. I cannot be, none of them can harm me because none of them can affect with immorality. And just a brief review of what we said last time is that according to Marcus Aurelius, what does not make a man worse than he was, neither makes his life worse than it was, nor hurts him without or within. So the only way you can be harmed, the only true harm is harm to your virtue, to your character. And the only one who can make yourself the opposite of virtuous is yourself. So the most other people can do is they can affect your possessions or your body or even your emotions, but how you respond to those instances of destruction or harm to those areas, that's really wherein lies your real harm. So as long as you don't respond to it in a way that harms you, and if you respond to it in a way that makes you better, so then they're not harming you. And we got very, very tied up into a discussion about whether or to what extent Judaism agrees with this or disagrees with this. Initially, I was saying that Judaism definitely recognizes that the essence of who you are is your mind, and these other things, your possessions and your body and your emotions, are not you. So in that sense, there's some common ground. But then I think we ended up at the end of our analysis saying that it does seem like Judaism recognizes that there can be things that are good and bad, even though they don't directly affect your soul. Like, we said that the Stoics called those things like wealth or health, indifference, preferred indifference and dispreferred indifference. So in other words, health doesn't affect my character, but it's something I would prefer because it makes it easier for me to maintain my character or to work on my character. And poverty is something that doesn't directly affect me. You can be poor and you could be a good person and you can make good decisions, but poverty can pose some challenges to maintaining your character. But it can also be the opposite, that wealth for some people sets up more of a pitfall for harming them, and poverty could make them a better person. So I really don't know. I still go back and forth about whether Judaism agrees with these or not. And I actually wanted to bring one weird proof. I meant to bring this last time, but I didn't. I didn't get to. We didn't get there. Okay, this is kind of a long excerpt, but I think it's important. Okay, so in Hilchos Tshuva, in the Laws of Tshuva, chapter 8, Rambam defines the ultimate reward as olam haba, and the ultimate punishment as kares. And by that, he doesn't mean that like everything we do is just for olam haba. What he means is that the soul is what lasts beyond death, and so you're gaining knowledge here, but what really all the stuff that you have here is going to eventually end, whereas your soul continues on. So then in chapter 9, he addresses this question. He says, since the distribution of reward for the mitzvos and the good that we merit if we keep the way of Hashem written in the Torah is life in the world to come, as it is stated, okay, quotes a pasuk, and the retribution of the wicked who abandon the ways of righteousness that are written in the Torah is kares, loss of your soul, as it is written, okay, quotes pasuk. What is the meaning of that which is written throughout the whole Torah? If you obey Hashem, such and such will come to you, and if you do not obey, such and such will happen to you. And all these things are in this world, such as satiety and famine, war and peace, dominion and lowliness, dwelling in the land and exile, success of one's deeds and loss, and the other terms of the covenant. So in other words, Rambam made the assertion that the real reward and punishment is what happens to your soul, which Marcus Aurelius would agree with, regardless of whether Marcus Aurelius held by immortality. But what happens to your soul and the state of your soul is where the real good and bad lies. And that's where the real reward and punishment lies. So Rambam's question is, if that's the case, what's the deal with all the brachos, the blessings that the Torah promises? Like, it seems like the Torah is advocating that if a physical idea of reward, that if you do the mitzvahs, you get physical reward. And if you do the averos, then you suffer physical punishment. So what is the deal with that? How do you reconcile the Rambam's assertion with what it says throughout the Torah? Okay, so let's go to the Rambam's answer. And then again, I don't want to dwell on this, but I think this is important for supporting our point here. He says, all of these things were true and will be true. And at a time when we do all the mitzvahs of the Torah, all the goods of this world will come to us. And at a time when we transgress them, all the bad things that are written in the Torah will befall us. Okay, and there's somewhat of a question here about how many of these promises of the Torah are only geared towards the nation as a whole, and how many of them apply to individuals. We're not going to get into that either. Yeah, Michael?
If you don't want to take this up, that's fine. But he makes it sound like it's a black and white. Like either we're doing all the mitzvahs and then we get
Right.
all the rewards, or not.
Right.
Like,
My understanding is that
doing
he's just saying the two extremes. But I could be wrong about that. I don't really know. Maybe ask me again when we get to Parshas Kisavo. Nevertheless, those good things are not the ultimate reward of the mitzvahs, nor are those bad things the ultimate retribution, which will be exacted for violating all the mitzvahs. Rather, here's an overview of these matters. Okay, so he's going to tell us how blessings and curses work. The Holy One, blessed is he, gave us this Torah, the tree of life, and anyone who does everything written in it and knows it with a complete and correct knowledge will merit through it life in the world to come, and he will merit according to the greatness of his actions and the greatness of his wisdom. If we are promised in the Torah that if we enact it with joy and good spirit and continually contemplate its wisdom, God will remove from us all of the things that prevent us from enacting it, such as sickness, war, famine, etc., and he will bestow upon us all of the good things which strengthen our ability to keep the Torah, such as satiety and wealth and abundant silver and gold, so that we will not occupy all of our days with our bodily needs. Rather, we will sit free to learn wisdom, to learn Chachma, and to do the mitzvah in order that we will merit life in the world to come. Accordingly, it says in this Torah, after promising us the goods of this world, and it will be a righteousness for you. Okay, so that's, to me, the best analogy in the modern era, I guess, is a scholarship. So, or let's say an academic scholarship. So if you are a student who has demonstrated that you are serious about learning, then the school will provide you with money so that you don't have to worry about earning a living, and will fund your ability to continue studying. Or let's say with a grant, where if you're involved in science and pursuing a certain, beneficial discovery or beneficial studies, so then you'll be funded so that you can continue pursuing that and not have to get another job. So all the goods that God gives us through the brachos are not the true goods. The true goods is the good of the soul, which is knowledge and mitzvos and the way we choose. But the goods that God gives us in the physical world are instrumental so that we can be involved in the true good. Yeah, Esty.
It seems to me, though, that you have to acknowledge the fact that he's calling them good.
Right.
In other
that
words,
was the point. I was right. I was just gonna say that point is he does call them good, just not the ultimate good.
right. And I think that I mean, I know that myself with Stoicism, part of the problem I have this little a cognitive dissonance, because I think we all naturally, just being physical creatures, will call something that's painful bad.
Right.
And I think that that's what's just so hard to understand is somebody causes you physical pain, if somebody, damages you, makes it you can't walk, how could you can understand how a Stoic could say that, that's not the real harm, but at the same time, how can you say it's not harm?
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think it's just important to keep in mind that we have a dual nature in this world. We have, and one is necessary we need the physical body and existence in order to be able to live on this other plane. And if we don't have the body, we can't do these other things. So there's why are you smiling?
Because I'm going to say yes and no. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not going to say these are the ultimate good, but the way that we are designed, these things, feel good and feel bad. And like if a person's having a famine and needs, like the Rambam was saying, all those different things that make it that you have to tend to your body needs more. Why do you need to do it? Because it's painful. You're hungry and it hurts and you have to do something in order to address it. We do have physical bodies and
right.
They're not essential, but at the same, in terms of our essence, but also we can't dispense with it.
Okay, right. So you're 100% right that you can't. We are not angels. We're not malachim, which are total intellects. But we have bodies and we have a psyche, and there is a certain. I think the word cognitive dissonance is correct. Is like you can, when you tell yourself, well, this isn't really me. There is a somewhat of a denial of the fact that I do experience this as bad, right? So that seems to be to be.
But it doesn't have to be bad. I understand that. A
right.
person can, let's say, my sister and I were just talking about this. People she knows who lost limbs in the war now in Israel, and
right.
There's a way to see it where it's not. They are functioning in ways where it's not necessarily being experienced as bad.
Right. So that's exactly the point I was going to make, which is I was going to make this through the Rambam. So I just open this folder. Hold on. I opened the folder. Did I not open the thing? Yeah, I'm just going to quote part of his explanation of Eov at the very end. Yeah, so this will be a good commercial for Eov. Okay, so if you learn Eov and you get the main point, which is above this this here, this is in the more 323. If a man knows this, meaning knows the main idea of Eov, all afflictions, okay, Yisurin, will be borne lightly by him, and misfortunes will not add to his doubts regarding Hashem, and whether he, that's I think capital H, whether he does or does not know, and whether he exercises providence, hashgacha, or manifest neglect. They will, to the contrary, increase his love of God, as it is said in the conclusion of the prophetic revelation in the book. Therefore, I abhor my prior thoughts, and I regret dust and ashes. As the sages of blessed memory have spoken about, those who do or who act out of love and are joyful in afflictions. So the question is like this. The question is, on the one hand, what you're saying is true, which is that if you stub your toe or lose your possessions or suffer physical illness, and you just tell yourself, well, this is not the essence of who I am, and you try to disassociate from that, then that's unhealthy and dishonest. On the other hand, it does seem like Judaism does envision a level where you can transcend the instinctive compulsion to label pain as bad and do so on a total level where you experience something bad. And let's say let's say hypothetically, you're so tuned into Mishlei and Tehillim and Teshuvah that when you suffer something physical, you experience the physical, like your brain registers this as pain, but you view it as good and you are joyous in what you suffered, and that to me is like what we were saying. It seems like Marcus Aurelius is depicting as the ideal, where the thing happens to you, and because you've rewired your internal world to take everything that happens to you and to make it into a cause of improving your character, so then it truly is beneficial to you. And so you actually genuinely do rejoice. Like, you're not engaging in any act of suppression or denial. You're truly rejoicing. And that's a very high level, but it does seem like that Chazal talk about that category. Yeah, I want to call on Esty first, just to respond. Yeah, Esty?
Yes, so what would you say, let's say, I agree with you, like Avraham Avinu or something like that with the arcade. Like, what would you say? I mean, I know it's just speculation, but that he was rejoicing in doing this, or he,
I mean, it does say that. It says that, or at least I mean, it doesn't say the word joy specifically, but let me just show you here really quickly, because I happen to know where it is. Actually, I don't know what parak is the Akeda in? 18? No, can't be 18. 21?
I think 23.
23? Okay. 22, close. The Rabag says that one of the lessons we learn from this is hold on just a second. Okay, maybe it's not the Rabag here. Maybe he says it elsewhere, but he says the fact that Avram was able to get nevuah while he was doing it, right? He was in the middle of the act, and then the Malach called out to him, which the Rambam says means he got nevuah. You can't get nevuah if you're upset. So the fact that he was even able to get nevuah shows that he was in a state of simcha.
Right, that's cool. And I guess then you also see that let's say Yaakov, when Yosef was gone, was not able to do it.
Right, he wasn't able to do it. Right. Yeah, and that's
Yaakov.
yeah, that's what Rabbi Moskowitz always used to point to about how Yaakov was a very perfected person, but there clearly were some Mishlaic things he didn't work out in terms of his attachment to his son, and the proof of that was that he fell into a depression because he was so overly attached to Yosef, and you could be on a very high level in certain areas and then have like one blind spot or one imperfection that you have to work out, and that could take in his case many years. Right.
But then what would you say that means that the Torah says that this is an ideal? But I mean, you certainly wouldn't say that Yaakov Avinu was like less of a great person, right? I mean, he's Yaakov Avinu. He had
Right.
flaws like everybody, and this was one of his flaws.
Right. It
But
was
like,
one of his flaws. He was a very high level person with a flaw, and that's all the Nevi'im had flaws.
I'm sorry. What I'm trying to ask is, would you say when you say that he has a flaw, it's a flaw meaning he suffered from it, right?
Right.
Like, and you're saying that this is something, but I guess when I hear flaw, I'm not sure. Are we saying and we saying this in terms of like too bad for him or like some kind of an objective judgment?
No, we're saying there was imperfection that he had to work on and do tshuva on. And I'm not currently holding in like what exactly the nature of that flaw or the tshuva was, but it was imperfection that he had to work on. Maybe I don't get what you're asking.
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
Okay. I'll call Michael in the meantime. Yeah, Michael?
Once again, if this is going to take us like too far afield, then you could just move on. But
I think this whole shiur is just frolicking in the fields. I think we are. I think with the we're in uncharted territory anyway. So yeah.
I mean, you made like something of an equation between like the Stoic idea of like a morphati of like loving all that happens to you, and like what the Rambam was describing. But I was a little confused about that because I see how both of them are saying that you should ultimately like at least the highest level is to like rejoice in what happens to you. But it seems to me that the reason you do that is different because it seems like the Stoic is doing it because like obstacles the way like they'll turn it into something to benefit them. Okay. Whereas it seems like the Rambam, I'm not really holding an Eov, but it seems like the Rambam is saying it has to do with recognizing its Hashem system, which is ultimately good. Yeah. And that's where you're rejoicing more in that way, that you recognize that what caused this is a system that's beneficial.
Okay, so I debated whether or not to bring this up, and I think just because I've had to actively restrain myself, then I'm going to bring it up now, which is, this is another point I discussed in that interview with the college student this morning. And again, disclaimer, I am not an expert on Stoicism, but one of the big question marks I have about Stoicism were either it differs from Judaism or I just don't understand it, is Judaism has a clear value system, okay? And our value system, as expressed in the pasuk that I quote a million times a day, in Yirmiyahu 9:23, is haskel v'yado osi, comprehending and knowing God, ki ani Hashem, that he is Hashem, oseh chesed mishpat utzedakah ba'aretz, who does kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth, ki be'elech hafasti num Hashem, because in these is my desire, says Hashem. So Judaism's value system is knowledge of God, meaning seeking knowledge of the ultimate reality through knowledge of the world and knowledge of Torah, right? Those are the two general areas through which we gain knowledge of God. So knowledge of God that culminates in living a life of kindness, justice, and righteousness. That's Judaism's value. And so the Rambam and Chazal, when they talk about rejoicing in afflictions, and when they talk about anything, and when they talk about the good and the bad, or when the Rambam here in Hilchos Tshuva is talking about the Torah as a tree of life, the life we're talking about here and the good we're talking about here is seeking knowledge of God in order to become better people. Whereas the Stoics, I don't have a sense of what they hold life is about. So you have, for example, Epictetus talking about, focusing on what's in your control and what's not in your control, and devoting yourself to what's in your control and not trying to control what's not in your control. Okay, good. That's a means to an end. Or Marcus Aurelius talking about not being upset by these people and living a life of virtue. But what is the positive good that Stoicism revolves around? I never had a clear idea of what that is, and I sometimes see glimmers of it, and then it falls by the wayside. Or this is a question we talked about last time also, like who asked this question? Did I delete the questions? Maybe I deleted the question. Oh, no. Yeah, Esty asked, what does it mean to do good for society? Which we still haven't gotten to yet for today. But to do good for society, like what good are we trying to bring about here? What is life? What does life revolve around? And again, there's not every system of ethics, conscious or unconscious, has to have two layers of goods. It has to have instrumental goods, things that are good because of something else. And then every system of ethics has to have something that you hold is good, not because of anything else, right? So let's say, for example, in America, people view going to work as good. Okay, why is going to work good? Because you make money. Why is making money good? Because you could buy things. Why is buying things good? Well, that's either going to have to come down to because things bring you pleasure, and pleasure is the ultimate good. And if you said why is pleasure good, then there's no answer. That might be your ultimate good. Or you might say buying things is good because then you are above everyone else, and it's about status, and like status is the ultimate good. But every system of ethics has to have like a bedrock of this is good, not because of something else, but it's an intrinsic good. So I understand very clearly I can identify very clearly what the Torah's intrinsic good is knowledge that culminates in good action. I don't know what Stoicism's view of good is, and maybe it's not right for me to lump it all into one category of Stoicism. Maybe it's Marcus Aurelius is good, and then Epictetus is good, and Seneca is good. Okay, so going back to what Michael was saying, and then I'll call on Michael, is yeah, I would say that it's an overlap in terms of being able to rejoice in bad stuff that happens to you. In Judaism's case, it's because you are attached to the true good of knowledge and action. Or let's say again, Rabbi Akiva is being tortured to death, and he's smiling, and students ask him, "Why are you smiling?" And he said, or laughing, and he says, "Because all my life I read the Shema, you should love Hashem with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your resources." And all your soul means even if they take your soul. And he says, I didn't know whether my love of God was such that it would enable me to transcend the love of my biological life. And I evidently it is, so he was rejoicing in his love of God. But Marcus Aurelius, I don't know what his ultimate thing is. Yeah, Michael.
Don't the Stoics hold by like moral virtue, and like they have the 4 virtues of like justice,
right?
wisdom,
but I just don't know what that is. Yeah, and that
What
might
do
be
you
a
mean you
lack
don't
on
know
my
what that
part.
is?
It might be a lack
Like,
on my
what do you
part
mean?
because I'm not reading up on it enough.
Like, what do you mean you don't know what that is?
Well, let's say justice, right? I know what justice means for us. For us, justice in Torah is, let's use Rabbi Jonathan Sachs's terms for tzedakah and mishpat, distributive justice and retributive justice. And for us, it means facilitating the creation of a society built around those principles of justice, in which the maximum number of individuals can actualize themselves as a truth-seeking mind. What does Marcus Aurelius envision a just society being? Everyone acting in line with justice, with virtue. What does that mean? Like, I'm going like this because, like, is it just like a robotic notion of we are now in line with virtue? Like, and then what? So I just don't have a positive conception of it. And again, I've seen glimmers of it, but it eludes me. It's like yeah, I don't know. And again, maybe I just haven't read up on it, and that might be my lack and my vice. It might be that like it's bad that I'm not looking into this. I don't know. Yeah, Isaiah.
I mean, going back to what you were saying about the Stoics maybe not having a system, or sorry, one second, about the Stoics not necessarily having like a I keep saying what I want to say.
But you
Maybe the
recognize
Stoics
it.
don't have a ultimate good in the way that like Judaism, like we know because we have Nevuah, we have a definitive ultimate good that you can read straight out of a pasuk.
Right.
But Stoicism, it was up to them in their own minds to develop an idea of the ultimate good, and therefore it won't be one agreed upon thing amongst all Stoics. At least I wouldn't think it would be.
Right. Right. That's what I was trying to acknowledge by saying maybe it's Marcus Aurelius's idea of the good and Epictetus's and Seneca's separately. Yeah, I'm not
Right.
saying they necessarily all have the same idea of the good. Yeah. And just to clarify here, I know I just said this, but I just want to make sure I'm abundantly clear. I don't care if you are well, maybe a 1-year-old is not going to apply. And no, even a 1-year-old. I just don't know what age, but let's say a 3-year-old. Okay, if you're a 3-year-old, toddler, or a 30-year-old investment banker, or a 60-year-old samurai, everyone has a value system, and it's only a question of how conscious and articulated it is, and like examined and intelligent, or how unconscious and unexamined and foolish it is. But everyone is operating on that, and it could be something as simple as pleasure is good, but everyone has a value system. Yeah, Esty.
I just want to say that you answered the question that I was trying to ask before.
Oh
When
yeah.
I was asking about a flaw, and I was saying in the negative. I was like, I was trying to ask, is there a positive? There just seems to be a different positive of what Yaakov Avinu was trying to get to in doing in dealing with, let's say his over-attachment to Yosef. Like the state that he was trying to get to is different from just not wanting to be in pain. I didn't know what it was.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you answered
Okay.
it.
Okay, good. I just to finish reading the Rambam, because the main point I wanted to get out of the Rambam was this is the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva again, was the point about how the brachos are at the same time, at one time they are goods, but they're instrumental goods for the real good, which is knowledge. Okay, but then he says for the curses, the klalos, it was also made known to us that if we abandon the Torah with our minds and involve ourselves in pursuits which are a waste of time, as it is said, and Yeshurun became fat and kicked. That's a term for Israel. And being fat, it means just becoming involved in physical pleasures, and kicking means rebelling against God. The true judge will remove from those who abandon the Torah all the goods of this world, which strengthen their ability to rebel, and he will bring upon them all the bad things which prevent them from acquiring existence in the world to come, such that they will perish in their wickedness. This is what was stated in the Torah: you will serve your enemies whom Hashem will send to you, because you did not serve Hashem your God with joy and a glad heart amidst abundance. Now, I don't want to go into right now how this happens. Like, does this, what about all the Rishaim who do have good? I don't want to go into that. I just want to get to the upshot here. Therefore, the explanation of the blessings and curses is as follows. If you worship Hashem with joy and keep his way, he will bestow all of these blessings upon you, and he will distance the curses to the extent that you will be free to become wise in Torah and to occupy yourselves in it, so that you can merit the world to come and partake of a world that is entirely good and achieve length of days that are forever long. Consequently, you will merit both worlds, a good life in this world, which brings you to the world to come. So again, that's an acknowledgement that there is such a thing as a good in this world, but it's an instrumental good because it's just for your body and your emotions, and then your mind, that will continue to Olam Haba. For if one does not acquire chachma and good deeds here, then he will have nothing by which he merits the world to come. As it is said, for there's no deed, account, knowledge, or wisdom in the grave. And if you abandon Hashem and immerse yourselves in food, drink, and lechery, znus, that's like sexual stuff and the like, he will bring upon you all these curses and remove all the blessings, to the extent that you will finish your days in panic and fear, and you will not have a free mind nor a whole body to do the mitzvahs, such that you will perish from the world to come. Consequently, you will cause the loss of two worlds. For at a time when a person is preoccupied in this world with sickness, war, and famine, he does not involve himself in wisdom, nor in the mitzvah, through which one merits the world to come. So the reason I want to read to the end is because something that I mentioned earlier myself, which is, Yeshurun became fat and kicked. What does that mean? It's a mistake that Klal Yisrael make all the time. Actually, I made a meme about this. Hold on. So, this is in Parshas Akev, Kochi v'otzim yadi. Let's see if I made Akev. Yeah. So I'll read for the audio. Panel 1, Israel, it's time to learn about money and the importance of, and he hands it to the kid, and the kid puts it into a vending machine that says forgetting Hashem, and the father says, Israel, no, right? So this is the classic mistake that that Jews make, is they get money, which is a good, it's identified as a good, but then if we forget Hashem, yeah, I have to close this, I'm gonna keep laughing. It was a good meme. That's one of my best Torah memes. Then if we forget Hashem, then that thing which was a blessing becomes a curse. So that's also interesting, because that, to me, again, is very much in line with the Stoics, which is that the same thing could be good or bad for you, depending on how it affects your character. So just to state where we're at right now, I think what the Stoics call, okay, both we and the Stoics acknowledge that the true good is not physical. Okay, we say it's knowledge, they say it's fill in the blank. All right, character, perfection, good choice, virtue, whatever it is. Okay, that's one thing. Point number 2 is both we and they acknowledge that among the things that are not the true good, there is a hierarchy, right? For us, we say that peace and health and wealth are goods, and famine and war and sickness are bad. And the Stoics call them preferred indifference and dispreferred indifference. Okay, so that's another commonality. And we in the Stoics also hold that even the preferred indifference, or the goods, can become bad for us when we make bad choices based on them. And we in the Stoics also hold that the dispreferred indifference, like sickness, can become good if we use them as impetus for becoming good. So that's a lot of agreement. So that's why the pendulum is swinging back to that side. But again, I think that there still is this big question mark. What do they hold as the real good? And we have a clear answer to that. And insofar as they don't, or as we don't know what their answer is, then I view them as separate. Yeah, SD.
Well, I think it makes the categories of preferred indifference and dispreferred indifference like also a question mark for the Stoic, because for somebody, the Torah, you know why they're good and why they're bad, because they help you towards the good, which we know what it is and how it helps. But if you don't know what the good, I don't know how they have a preferred and dispreferred indifference without knowing what the good is.
Right. That's a good question also. Right. And that gets back to the point I was making. They must have an idea of the good such that they can have preferred and dispreferred indifference, but I would like to see that articulated. I also want to get back to another point you made about we call pain bad. And I do think that the Torah takes a different educational approach than the Stoics do, because the Torah leans in to us calling these things good. And the people who are Chachamim and Tzaddikim know that that's not the true good, but the average person still calls them good. The Stoics, though, like it sounds like they're trying to not use the word good in order to drive home this point that it's not the true good. So I think that's like a pedagogical, like an educational difference between us and them. And I look, I don't know, you know, maybe the Torah really would agree with them if this was for you, but since the Torah is a system that's designed to be, you know, kept for all generations, maybe it's a bad bet to rely on that. Like if you start saying that wealth is not good, then you're going to turn people off to Torah, because it's going to look like the Torah is saying that you shouldn't view wealth as a good, you know? Yeah, SD.
That was just a really interesting point. I was just wondering, I don't know if this is like a little meta, and I didn't think it through that far, but is it possible that there's a Stoic idea of good being not being affected by things like that in and of itself?
Yeah. So I was thinking that, and I see that most in Epictetus out of the three, that like there's a word for this, not immovability, but like imperturbability, which the Stoics have some sort of a term for, that is a good in its own right, which is kind of similar to, I don't know if this is actual Buddhism, but the stereotyped Buddhism of being at peace, you know, and not being affected by worldly or detachment from worldly phenomena. That could be a good in its own right. And yeah, I don't see that as much in Marcus Aurelius, but I do see that. I think I see that in Epictetus, but again, I might be wrong about that. That is a possibility.
That's not a Torah value, is it?
So it is a Torah value, but as a means. Okay, what we call that is precious. Precious being, well, okay, it's part of precious. Precious being separating from the external world, the external pleasures, okay, physical pleasures. That's one element of it. I also think that this is part of our idea of bitachon, of trust or security in God, where your security in God is such that you're unaffected by physical things that happen. But again, the means there is very different. So the means might be so different, or sorry, the end might be so different. The means and the end might be so different that maybe it's wrong to call these things actually similar. Maybe they're only similar in their manifestations. But I think Torah does have another aspect of it is histapkus, or samech b'chalko, of being content with what you have, and not letting your sense of happiness fluctuate with your external circumstances. So the Torah like does have elements of this, but each one in its place. Yeah, Isaiah?
Yeah, I'm reminded of the guy peeing on the Rambam story. I'll let you explain what that story.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So Isaiah is calling this the guy peeing on the Rambam story, which is how my one of my students called it by mistake. Let me see if I can find it. Avos, humility. This is not it. Wait. Shpal Ruach. I don't think this is it. Oh, maybe this is it. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Yeah. Okay, so this is the story the Rambam tells. Okay. We have already mentioned in the previous chapter. Nope, that's not it. Okay, here we go. So he's talking about the humility, okay, being humble. I've already seen in one of the books about character traits that one of the pious was asked, and it was said to him, what was the happiest day that has passed in your life? He said, The day I was traveling on a ship, and my place in it was the most humble of places, and I was dressed in a worn out rags, and there were merchants and wealthy men on the ship, and I was lying in my place. So he's like, in the lower decks, and one of the people of the ship stood up to relieve himself, and my lowliness in his eyes and the diminished state I was in, I think there's a mistake here, to the extent that he exposed himself and urinated on me. And I was astonished at the strengthening of the trait of audacity in his soul. And as God lives, my soul was not pained by his deed at all, and no anger was stirred in it. And I rejoiced with great joy that I had reached a level where this insult did not pain me, and I would not pay any attention to it. Okay, so this guy basically saw, was hanging out in the low place. This guy like saw him and was so, sometimes you see a homeless person on the street and you feel sorry for them. Sometimes you see them in such a state where like you want to break identification with them. This guy saw this guy and he's like, this guy is so disgusting. So he urinated on him, and this guy who got urinated on was like, huh, what an interesting person. What an interesting character that he would pee on someone who's like dressed like me, and then he realized like, oh, like I wasn't taking any ego any offense at that. So that's like the highest level of humility. So humility also plays a role into that. Thanks, Isaiah. That's another part where this plays its role. Okay. So now let's get to what we intended to work on, which is these last.
What did you just read from? What source was that?
Oh, that was the Rambam in Avos, Pirkei Avos 4:4, which is Ma'od Ma'od Heve Shval Ruach. Be very, very lowly in spirit. Ki Tikvas Enosh Rima, because the end of man, the hope of man is worms.
Okay.
Yeah, and the joke that Isaiah was referring to was my student in Shalhevet once said, it's like the time the guy peed on the Rambam, because she thought that this was a story about that the Rambam was telling about himself. So I now refer to that as the story about the guy peeing on the Rambam, but it wasn't him. Okay, so now we wanted to work on this last part of this chapter 1. Okay, I can neither be injured, none of them can harm me, because none of them can infect me with immorality. Okay, nor can I become angry with my kinsman, with someone who's related to me, or hate him. Okay, so that's a point that this really deserves to be its own point here. Right, because the question is, why does the fact that this person is partakes of the same Tselem Elokim, the same intellect, why should that be a cause of you not being angry with him? Okay, but then he also says, because we were born to work together like feet or hands or eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. And then this last part is the part that I'm most uncertain about. To work against one another, therefore, is unnatural, or to oppose nature, or contrary to nature. And it is acting against one another to be vexed and to turn away, or to be vexed and turn with one another, or to turn away from him, is to tend to antagonism, or anger and rejection count as working against. So what I would really like to explore here is what's the flow of this argument here, right? I can't be harmed by him. Okay, I get it, because he can't make you immortal. Not immoral. Okay, he also can't make you immortal. Only you could do that. He can't make you immoral. You can't be angry with him because he's also a Tselem Elokim. He's also a fellow human. Okay, so we need to understand that. And we were born to work together. So in what sense? And then working against one another is unnatural. And then anger and rejection count as working against. Like, if you really want to dissect it, it's 5 points, but I don't know if we need to frame them all in that way. And by the way, I will say one more contender for the Stoic idea of the good is living in line with nature. They do say that a lot also. But the problem with that is, what is their idea of nature, or living in line with God's will, which they also sometimes say, or the will of the gods. Okay, that gets into the whole Stoic idea of what God, gods, and nature are. Okay, but what is their conception of that? I don't, that's something that like requires analysis. But anyway, back to our passage here. Okay, so I'm open to hearing any thoughts that you have to say, but the question is, what is the flow or unity in these steps? Yeah, David.
Well, one thing I'll say at the very least to talk about nature, that we're working together. This seems that what Marcus Aurelius is suggesting is the fact that this is a very natural thing, and this is just the way that things are supposed to work. That whatever this, like, practicing Stoicism is not like against one's nature, should not be difficult in that regard. Just the fact that this is natural should make things easier, insofar as you're not like going against the tide.
Okay, that's a great point in its own right. So there are philosophies of life which advocate a good which is unnatural. So, for example, certain ascetic sects where you're depriving yourself of pleasure is unnatural, or the Rambam always points out that in Sefer Devarim, when, or in I guess in Torah in general, when Hashem points out that the Ovdei Avodah Zarah would do child sacrifices, and there are a couple of psukim where it says, and God does not demand that of you. Rambam always points out that the Torah does make demands of you, but the demands are in line with nature. They're not, the Torah is not going to demand that you do something that is totally contrary to nature. And I'm saying that on a systemic level. Like there might be individual cases where something goes against your particular nature, but not Torah's not going to say you have to renounce all pleasure. The Torah's not going to say, let's say like Catholic priests, right? Like the Rambam uses that as an example, is you have to be celibate. Well, that goes against human nature. The Torah does not demand that of you, or anything like that. So David's pointing out this is natural, and the fact that he frames it as natural is for us it's a check in Stoicism's prose columns, but it's also a point that he's making, that Marcus Aurelius is making. Yeah, Tamar.
I don't think this is the main point that he's making, but I think it's relevant that there is such a thing as like society functioning well or not functioning well.
Yeah.
And when you have like, I don't even mean society, I mean like civilization.
Okay.
I think that I think he's, sort of, I think not essentially, but at least partially referring to the concept of having a civilization where people cooperate and maybe like are invested in each other's good, or maybe that's a separate point. But I think the idea of a cooperative society or a civilization is something that is very different from its opposite. Okay, so just to make sure I understand you, so you're saying that irrespective of what he holds the ultimate good is, having a cooperative society is more beneficial than an uncooperative society. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that reminds me of in Pirkei Avos. I always forget where this is. Not in 2. Not in 1. Oh, is it in 3? Did I give a shiur on this? Oh yeah, I gave a shiur a long time ago. This is like Rabbi Chanina Sagana Kohanim statement. Hevei mispalo b'shloma shel malchus. Okay. This is unfortunately relevant in America and Israel all the time, but especially now. You should daven for the peace of the government. I know it literally means monarchy, but it means the government. Sh'ilamale mora'ah, because if it weren't for the fact that people feared the government, ish es re'ehu chayim bela'o, then each man would swallow his fellow alive. Now, this is a particular model because it says fear of the government, but this last point and the first point, the shalom of the government and each man swallowing his fellow alive, those are two alternatives that are reflected here. Like either we are working together, which is going to be instrumental to whatever good Marcus Aurelius says we should pursue, or if we work against one another, it's going to inhibit that. So whatever, even if this guy is not on board, even if this officious, ungrateful, abusive, treacherous, malicious, and selfish guy is not on board with the good, it's in my best interest and his best interest if we find a way to work together and to promote the idea of working together, because that's going to be good for society, for whatever society's good is. I think that's a good point also.
Yeah, I would say also, just to frame it a little bit in terms of his language, that I think I think he's saying that part of the nature of humanity is that you should be able to work together, and that
right,
you make the world better when you do. Sort of.
Right.
It's like,
that is the analogy, I think, of the body, right? Is that that he doesn't view each person as it's not like we're just a bunch of individuals and it's a dog eat dog world out there, and what do you call might makes right, or the what's the line from Cloud Atlas, the weak are meat and the strong will eat, but rather there is such a thing as a society that is like an organism, and we're all parts of that organism, and that's part of nature. That Aristotle had two definitions of man, or two statements about man. Man is the rational animal, meaning that we have an animalistic physical body and a truth-seeking mind. But man is a political animal, and political not in the sense of like Trump and Biden, but political in the sense of we are made to work together to achieve a good together, as opposed to, let's say, an organism that is like a lone organism that just like does its own thing. We do work together. Yeah, Esty?
Yeah, I think in that language that also, supports the idea that he's saying that what is the good is to, like, the arguments being made on the basis that it is good to be in line with nature, and
Right.
it's to go against it is clearly from the language he's using, I think in all the translations, that would be obviously a bad thing to do.
Right. Okay, that's a good takeaway as well, which is that regardless of what we say Marcus Aurelius holds about the ultimate good, in terms of like if we put the question to him, we see certain things about his view here, which is that the good is somehow centered on the fact that that we partake of intelligence, a portion of the divine, and the good is has to do with what is, seeing goodness and badness for what they are, and the good has to do with work with being in line with nature, and the good has to do with working with one another to achieve that as a whole. So those are like notes to take for his view of the good from this first paragraph here. Oh, I gotta make a statement also. Sorry. Whenever you're learning any text, there's a methodological mistake that you can make, which is, on the one hand, you should raise all questions you can on the text, but on the other hand, don't demand that the author answer all your questions in this one paragraph. I find that like many times people are overly demanding of the author. And first of all, if you were writing a book, you would think it's unfair if someone demanded that you answer all of their questions in the first paragraph. Like Avram Ben Ram said when someone criticized the Mishnah Torah of his father, and he said, my father wanted to write as concisely as possible, and if he could have condensed all the Torah into one chapter, he would have done it. And he didn't. But so same thing here. And especially if this is a book that was not written for public consumption, So I think that what the shift in mind that we should take. I know I criticized Stoicism a lot today because I had that conversation this morning. I don't mean to launch that at Marcus Aurelius based on this paragraph here. Like, he's writing for himself, and so we're peering into his diary and like trying to get knowledge from that. So we shouldn't say, no, you should have written your diary in a way that suits me and answers my questions. So I think these are all good notes. Okay. Any other observations here? I think the thing that I still feel like we haven't answered is, how does realizing that, how does the anger drop away here, right? Like, I understand, this point earlier in the entry, that if you view this person as acting against you out of spite or evil, then you could be angry with him. But if you say, no, he just is ignorant of the good, and like, if anything, I should feel sorry for him, to me, that dissipates the anger or diminishes the anger. But how does the anger diminish here from the fact, like, in other words, is he saying that because I recognize that we are part of a system, and if I allow myself to be angry, then that's working against our goals, therefore I shouldn't be angry with him? Like, because that's if you just put these two together, nor can I become angry with someone who's related to me or hate him, and anger and rejection count as working against, those 2 points go together. But it also seems like he's relating the anger to like viewing this person as a kinsman. Yeah, Michael.
I have a question, but I think it's related, but you might have just said it. I'm not sure.
Sure.
So yeah, at the end, he says that anger counts as working against. So is it just the emotion or the feeling of anger in and of itself is like reducing their effectiveness, or is it specific, or if it like materializes in action? Because
that's a good question. Right.
Yeah.
Let me just state that in my own terms, which is that when he says anger and rejection, or vexed and turning away, or acting, vexing and turning away. So when he says that counts as working against, is being angry. Let's say Marcus Aurelius is seething inside, but he doesn't change the way he interacts with people. Would he still say that is working against, or is it only working against if you're angry because anger can manifest in like your action? Yeah, that's a good question. I'll tell you what I thought he meant, but let's explore it. I thought he meant that it is it's working against because you might come to act on it or just be disinclined to like work with a person. But now that I think about it, now that I think about it, I'm thinking about it. What do you guys say? Yeah, Michael?
I mean, without trying to define what the good is,
Yeah.
maybe you could say that to the individual. So like in your example with Marcus Aurelius, to Marcus Aurelius, it's not acting outside of his nature, but it is contrary to his nature.
Mm-hmm.
But he seems to be defining some sort of a good here for society working together.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd say that it's not bad towards that, assuming it doesn't affect his actions. But on an individual level, maybe if there's a good for society and a good for the individual,
Yeah.
then it would be bad. It would not be good for the individual, but it wouldn't matter for society, assuming it doesn't affect his actions.
Okay, so I think I can elaborate on that with a muscle here. So like the rows of the upper and lower teeth, right? So I don't know about you, but my teeth are not sentient beings. Okay, they don't think and they don't have feelings. Okay, but imagine a tooth that was being forced to chew, but said, "I hate working with the upper teeth. Okay, I don't want to be in this job." Right? So you would say, so if teeth are purely physical and they obey what they're supposed to do, so then wouldn't, then as long as they're doing their job, that's all we care about. But if the tooth, if we cared about like attitude in the job and the tooth didn't want to do its job, we would say that that's a defective tooth. So too, if you don't want to work with someone, even though you force yourself to work with them, you are denying a part of your nature, which is that we were made to work together. So you have not aligned your emotions with what your true nature is, which is a social political being. And so even if you're doing the right actions, that is good if you were an animal. But if you're a human, which is a thinking being or a choosing being, then it would be in your interest to straighten out your emotions also to want to work with them. Yeah, David?
I feel like there are cases where there are like certain people where you just like don't want to work with them. Like you can't force yourself to like want to like be around certain people.
Right. So that's a good question. So what should you do? Well, here's an example. When did he write this? I forgot if I mentioned. I think I actually did mention this in the first Shiur. He wrote this during the Macromanic Wars, which occupied much of Marcus's reign. The Kadi from modern Moravia, I don't know any of these places, had been defeated by 174, but they again rebelled in 177. And Marcus had just successfully defeated them when he died in 180. So he was writing this when he was at war, and war. I think most of his life was filled with war. So these are guys, like David was saying, like these guys are not wanting to work with him, and he's actively trying to like defeat them and kill them. So how do you square those two things? Yeah, Tamar?
Well, I was thinking first about an answer to the first question of if you don't like someone, you don't enjoy their company, for example.
Yeah.
And you have to work with them. I think that in that case, I mean, maybe you can't do it all the time, but you can transcend your sort of petty feelings. I think
Right.
It's in a person's ability, maybe not always, but if you're really thinking about it, I don't know, let's say you're working together at a job and you think your job is important and you could appreciate this person's role in the company even if you don't like them.
Right.
In terms
Right.
of the other stuff, I don't know exactly, but I guess there's a difference between maybe appreciating the human nature is to cooperate and to maybe recognizing the need to destroy some people who are trying to destroy you or something like that.
Right. So just to restate what you're saying here is that well, I'm gonna say it in the opposite order, is that yeah, in certain cases, like they say, it takes two to tango. So like if your tango partner does not want to tango, then you can't work with them in the tango. Like it's just by definition it's not going to work. You might need to kill them. When these people are trying to invade Rome and destroy Rome or whatever they're trying to do, I assume they're trying to destroy Rome. That's also bad for society, and he has to defeat them, or in a work environment, you might have to like fire them or like bring them to the boss's attention, and their boss might have to fire them. And it's unfortunate, but like for the good of the society, then they can't just be tolerated. But then what Tamar's said first is that you can still have certain things in your attitude of not being petty, again, not viewing it as they're doing this to me and getting locked in that self-centered worldview, but instead recognizing like, no, look, this person is also a fellow human being, and their ignorance is making them think that if they are obnoxious, then that's good. And I know that that's not the case. I know that obnoxiousness is ugly, and that it makes people not want to work with you. And I feel sorry for them for that. So you're at least shaping your internal world to not be triggered by them and to make you open to working with them, even if you can't. But you got to be practical, right? Like I think at the end of the day, you do have to be practical, and you do also have to think about the system as a whole. Like if their refusal to cooperate is harming you, you do have a right to guard against that. And if they're harming the system, then you have a responsibility to take action for that also. Okay. Anything else here? Okay, let's do this. I think the plan is I'm going to attempt to just state a unifying idea, and then I want to read the second chapter, but not start analyzing it yet, just to get it in our minds. Yeah, Michael.
Sorry, just one question. Do you think, I mean, I know you said that we're not really sure about what the Stoics hold the good is. Do you think it's possible that they hold by, like, there's a good for the individual and then a separate good for the society?
It's possible, but I would not think that that's the case. Because yeah, I don't know. I feel like the fact that he holds that there are. Okay, I'm going to contrast it with something else. So Aristotle held that, human beings were not all created equal, right? He held that there were people who by nature were slaves, right? And he was wrong. But for him, he could hold that there's like one good for the individual, but society's goal is to like serve the people, what I'm not, hold on. Okay, I'll just state it in the positive. I think the fact that he holds that all human beings are equal, to me, suggests that there's going to be one collective good for everyone. But to me, that's the simplest simplest assumption.
Well, how do we know that he holds all humans are equal?
Because that I've seen the true nature of the wrongdoer himself and know that he's related to me, not in the sense that we share blood and seed, but by virtue of the fact that we both partake of the same intelligence and so a portion of the divine.
Do you have to say it's equal though? Like, can one person have
I mean by nature equal. I don't mean quantitatively equal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he's acknowledging that it's not quantitatively equal, that he does have more knowledge than they do. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to attempt to state my own takeaway here, and now that we've done everything here, or examine all parts, and then feel free to state your takeaway. So my attempting takeaway here, is that in the morning, before you encounter people like this, you need to prime yourself and remind yourself that there are two modes you could be in. There's a self-centered mode where you're going to take everything personally and view everything as revolving around you, and view actions that are done that annoy you as being done out of some sort of spite or target. Or you could recognize that, no, all human beings are by nature equal, and the only reason people do bad is because they have ignorance, which is unfortunate, and that I am part of a whole and related to this other person, and we were created to work together, and it's natural to work together, and that they can't harm me except by making me like them, which only I can do, and therefore I should strive as much as possible to interact with them based on their true nature and not based on this selfish depicting of them as they're my opponent. If I had to like state everything in one shot. Okay. That's the takeaway. And again, the importance is to do this before you're in the situation, because it's very, very hard to do this in the situation. But if you say this every morning, which hopefully some of us will experiment with, then you'll have a greater success rate. Anyone want to just state any other takeaways that they got from this from the last three sessions? Okay, so here's what we're going to do just to end off. We're going to read 3 translations of the next chapter, not raise any questions. I just want it to be in our minds, and then we can analyze it next time. Yeah, tomorrow.
Just a quick observation that I think is interesting
Yeah.
is that he doesn't begin the morning by telling himself what attitude he's supposed to have. Instead, he thinks about an idea that will incline him to the best attitude. I just think it's interesting.
Interesting. That is a good point, right? He doesn't think about what attitude he should have. He thinks about ideas which will give rise to the best attitude. Yeah, yeah. And this is a fairly well known point that Stoicism is considered the forerunner of cognitive behavior theory in psychology. And cognitive behavior theory is the to state it loosely, SD, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the key to changing behavior and feelings is to change the way you think about things. And so in other words, instead of there are other modes of psychology where you work on the emotions directly or on the behaviors, and cognitive behavior theory is you work on the cognition, on the way you think, and then that will result in different feelings and different behaviors.
You also do the behaviors, but yeah.
Right. Cognitive behavior theory. Right. Yeah, David.
One other thing together with what Tamara was saying, I think what you said about from Rabbi Moskowitz about Mishle and how it'll change a person. If you just rehearse this idea morning after morning after morning after morning,
Yeah.
just thinking about the idea and getting it clear, I think then we'll also, as what you were saying from Rabbi Moskowitz, will change the way that you think about your day.
Right. So the quote that David's saying from Rabbi Moskowitz is Rabbi Moskowitz was of the belief that the key to changing your behavior is just reviewing the idea and getting it clear. So doing it, making it part of your morning routine will do that, and you'll end up thinking about it or at the very least bringing it to mind and giving yourself a chance to think about it throughout the day. Yeah. Okay, let's just read the next chapter and then we'll stop for tonight. Okay, so yeah, SD.
I just had one more takeaway that I'm
Sure.
just thinking about, which is that, even if you learn something and even if it's like the flip side of what you're just saying.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily like stay with you. Like just because you knew it yesterday doesn't mean you wake up and now you're just adding on to yesterday. Like that's not your baseline.
Right.
There are just certain things that we will slip back into and regress into and just certain inclinations, and you have to keep working on that.
Yep, definitely. And this is one of the points I'm going to try to drive home at Nija next year in my Tefillah class. Is this is why we daven 3 times a day? Is you are rehearsing and reviewing what all the proper ideas are that lead to that give you a reality check that lead you to a good life. And you could forget it from the morning to the afternoon. You could forget it during davening. It's that easy. Okay. Next chapter. Okay, again, 3 translations. First is Long, George Long. Whatever this is that I am, it is a little flesh and breath and the ruling part. Throw away thy books. No longer distract thyself. It is not allowed. But as if thou wast now dying, despise the flesh. It is blood and bones in a network, a contexture of nerves, veins, and arteries. See the breath also, what kind of a thing it is. Air, and not always the same, but every moment sent out and again sucked in. The third, then, is the ruling part. Consider thus, thou art an old man. No longer let this be a slave. No longer be pulled by the strings like a puppet to unsocial movements. No longer either be dissatisfied with thy present lot or shrink from the future. Okay, next is A.S.L. Farquharson. This, whatever it is that I am, is flesh and vital spirit and the governing self. Disdain the flesh, blood and bones and network, a twisted skein, I forgot how to pronounce that word, of veins, nerves, veins, and arteries. Consider also what the vital spirit is, a current of air, not even continuously the same, but every hour being expelled and sucked in again. Then there's a third part, the governing self. Put away your books, be distracted no longer. They are not your portion. Rather, as if on the point of death, reflect like this. You are an old man. Suffer this governing part of you no longer to be in bondage, no longer to be a puppet pulled by selfish impulse, no longer to be indignant with what is allotted in the present, or to suspect what is allotted in the future. And the easiest to read one, Waterfield. This thing that I am, whatever we are to call it, is flesh, spirit, and the command center. I like command center as the translation instead of governing self or ruling spirit. Forget your books and don't let it upset you. That's not allowed. Indeed, as one on the point of death, despise the flesh. It is just blood, bones, and a network of nerves, veins, and arteries. Then consider what spirit is. No more than air and never constant, continually belched out and gulped back in. So that leaves the third ingredient, the command center. Look at it this way. You're elderly. Put an end to allowing its enslavement. Put an end to being tugged here and there like a puppet at the prompting of selfish impulses. Put an end to both complaining about your present fate and shrinking from the future. Okay, so Blenetter, next week we'll continue with the analysis of this. I'm glad that we spent 3 weeks on that first chapter. Those were all good discussions, and I'm glad we didn't rush it. So thank you again for joining me, and until next time. See ya.
Good night. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.